In a world that's hyper-connected yet often emotionally disconnected, loneliness has become a silent epidemic. You've felt it, haven't you? That deep, gnawing emptiness even when surrounded by people. We are taught that happiness lies in relationships, social circles, and material achievements. But what happens when all these things fall short? What happens when the noise dies down, and we're left with the silence of our own company? But is loneliness truly something to fear? Or could it be an opportunity for something much deeper? In this video, we'll explore the Buddhist perspective on loneliness and how solitude, when understood correctly, can be a space of profound growth. We'll uncover how the fear of being alone, something that has plagued humanity for centuries, can be transformed into an essential tool for self-reflection, peace, and spiritual awakening. The story of the Buddha's own journey through solitude holds the key to overcoming the fear of being alone. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why embracing solitude might be the greatest step you can take toward personal and spiritual growth. But don't just take my word for it. Stick with me until the end, because this video contains life-changing insights that can alter your view on loneliness forever. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment below. Let's dive deep into this together and explore how being alone can lead to the most profound connection of all, the connection with yourself. We can understand and delve deeper into the fear of loneliness through Buddhism as follows. In today's modern world, loneliness is often viewed as something to be feared or avoided at all costs. We are constantly surrounded by a society that emphasizes the importance of being with others, whether that be in relationships, friendships, or through social media. Many people believe that happiness and success are measured by the number of people around them or the number of things they possess. Yet, paradoxically, even with all the outward connections and material wealth, many still feel a profound emptiness within. This dissonance is often what gives rise to the fear of being alone. This fear of solitude is compounded by the distractions we face daily. Phones, social media platforms, and the constant bombardment of entertainment have become so ingrained in our lives that we rarely find the opportunity for quiet reflection. The constant need to be busy, to be connected, has created a society where being alone can feel like a threat. Yet, in Buddhism, the concept of being alone is not viewed as something negative or something to fear. Instead, it is seen as an essential space for personal growth, self-reflection, and spiritual awakening. The Buddha's life offers us a profound example of how solitude can be transformative. Before he attained enlightenment, Siddhartha Gautama, the man who would become the Buddha, was a prince living in the lap of luxury, surrounded by wealth and power. He had everything that society would say a person needs to be happy. But despite all these external comforts, he felt an overwhelming sense of dissatisfaction and emptiness. This feeling of discontent was not born from his external circumstances but from his inner world. Siddhartha realized that the pleasures of the senses, material wealth, worldly success, and indulgence did not lead to true peace or lasting happiness. Thus, Siddhartha left his palace, his kingdom, and all that he knew behind. His journey into solitude was not merely a physical departure from his palace, but a deep, inward journey of self-discovery. In the stillness of the forests, away from the distractions of his former life, Siddhartha was able to confront the deepest questions of human existence. What is the nature of suffering? Why do we experience it? And, most importantly, how can we transcend it? It was in solitude that he uncovered the answers to these questions and attained the enlightenment that would later guide millions of people toward liberation. The paradox of loneliness is that, in a world so interconnected through technology, the fear of being alone seems to grow stronger. People are constantly in touch with each other through text messages, social media, and phone calls, yet many feel more isolated than ever before. This disconnection between physical presence and emotional connection is a core issue. We often confuse the presence of others with true connection, yet many people still feel an overwhelming sense of loneliness despite being surrounded by friends and family. This fear of loneliness stems from an aversion to stillness. Many people fear what might arise in the silence, fear of facing their inner world and confronting the uncomfortable emotions that are often avoided in the hustle and bustle of daily life. We fill our time with distractions, not because we are necessarily enjoying them, but because we are afraid of what will happen when we have nothing to occupy our minds. In Buddhism, this fear is addressed through the practice of mindfulness and meditation. Meditation, particularly, is a way to sit with ourselves and to learn to accept what is. When we sit alone in silence, we are given the opportunity to listen to the mind, instead of fleeing from our thoughts. Meditation teaches us how to observe them without attachment or judgment. This process is a form of self-acceptance, allowing us to come to terms with the emotions and thoughts that arise, no matter how uncomfortable they may be. As Siddhartha's journey illustrates, solitude played a key role in his path to enlightenment. Solitude, in the Buddhist tradition, is not just being physically alone, but also about being alone with our thoughts and emotions. The Buddha's time in the forest was not about escape but about confronting the deepest aspects of the human condition. This is a powerful lesson for us in today's world, where we are taught to constantly be busy, to constantly be interacting, and to avoid the discomfort that comes with being still. A key aspect of the Buddha's teachings is the understanding of the nature of suffering, which is inherent in all human experience. Suffering arises from attachment, from the desire to hold onto things, people, or even feelings that are fleeting. The root cause of this suffering, the Buddha taught, is our inability to accept the impermanence of life. Everything, whether it be relationships, wealth, health, or even our own thoughts, is transient. Solitude provides us the opportunity to sit with this truth, to come to terms with the fact that all things are impermanent and that suffering arises from our resistance to this reality. Through the practice of mindfulness, solitude becomes a space of deep reflection, where we are able to see the truth of things without the clouding influence of external distractions. It is in these moments of stillness that we can begin to see the workings of the mind, to understand our habitual thought patterns, and to develop the wisdom to transcend them. While many people view solitude as something to be avoided or feared, the Buddha's teachings show us that solitude, when embraced with mindfulness, can become a space of healing and transformation. The key to transforming solitude into a blessing lies in how we approach it. If we enter solitude with fear, with resistance, or with the desire to escape from our emotions, then it becomes a source of suffering. But if we enter solitude with openness, with the intention to observe and learn, it becomes a tool for personal growth. One of the central teachings of Buddhism is the practice of impermanence, anicca. Everything in life is temporary, including our experiences of loneliness and isolation. By embracing the impermanence of our emotions, we can learn not to attach to them or to identify ourselves with them. This allows us to experience these emotions fully but without being overwhelmed or consumed by them. Through this practice, we begin to see that loneliness is not something to be feared, but rather something that can be acknowledged and released. Fear is one of the primary emotions that arise when we are faced with solitude. We are afraid of the discomfort that comes with being alone, afraid of the silence, and perhaps afraid of facing our own thoughts. But fear itself is not something to be feared in Buddhism. It is simply another thought, another emotion that arises in the mind. The Buddha taught us that our emotions are not fixed or permanent. They come and go, and they can be observed and understood. The key to overcoming fear in solitude is mindfulness. Mindfulness allows us to observe our thoughts and emotions without becoming attached to them. Instead of reacting to the fear of being alone, we can simply acknowledge it and let it pass. Over time, with consistent practice, the fear of being alone begins to lose its power, and we are able to experience solitude as a space for inner peace and personal insight. If the idea of being alone feels overwhelming, start small. Set aside 5 to 10 minutes each day to be alone in silence. Without any distractions, use this time to simply be present with yourself, paying attention to your thoughts and feelings without judgment. During your moments of solitude, practice mindfulness. Focus on your breath, observe the thoughts that arise, and allow them to pass without attachment. Notice the sensations in your body, the sounds around you, and the environment in which you are. This practice will help you develop a deeper connection with yourself and learn to find peace in silence. When feelings of loneliness or fear arise, remember that these emotions are temporary. They are not permanent aspects of who you are. By practicing mindfulness, you can allow these emotions to pass without identifying with them or allowing them to control your actions. Solitude is an opportunity for self-reflection. Take time to reflect on your thoughts, actions, and life choices. Ask yourself important questions. What do I want out of life? What are my deepest fears? How can I grow as a person? Solitude allows you to gain clarity on these questions and develop a deeper understanding of your true self. The fear of being alone is natural, but it is not something to be feared in the Buddhist tradition. In fact, solitude is a vital aspect of spiritual growth. It is in solitude that we are given the space to reflect, to meditate, and to connect with our true selves. The Buddha's life teaches us that it is through solitude, through confronting the mind and emotions in stillness, that we are able to reach enlightenment. By embracing solitude with mindfulness and compassion, we can transform it from a source of fear into a path of peace, self-discovery, and personal growth. The more we practice sitting with ourselves in silence, the more we learn to appreciate the present moment and to accept the impermanence of our emotions. In this way, solitude becomes a powerful tool for spiritual awakening, bringing us closer to the peace and happiness that we all seek. Here is a story about a young monk titled, "The 5 Years of Solitude of the Monk." Please listen and feel free to apply it to your own life. In the quiet hills of a distant temple, a young monk embarked on a journey that would transform his life forever. The monk, a devout seeker of truth, decided to spend an entire year in solitude, far away from the distractions of society and the noise of everyday life. His goal was not merely to escape the chaos of the world, but to confront himself, his thoughts, emotions, and fears, in a deeper way. This story of the monk's year of solitude is not only a tale of spiritual growth, but also an illustration of the profound power that solitude can have on our journey towards self-realization. At the beginning of his retreat, the monk struggled. He had left behind the companionship of fellow monks, the rhythm of temple life, and the busy interactions of the outside world. For the first time in his life, he was truly alone. Initially, the silence was overwhelming. The monk found himself alone with his thoughts, which were often restless and full of doubts. Loneliness crept into his heart, and physical discomfort became a constant companion. His mind, unaccustomed to being still, churned with worry, frustration, and fear. The longer he stayed, the more he wondered if he had made the right decision. However, as the days went by, something began to shift. The monk, with deep resolve, began to embrace the silence. Instead of fighting it or succumbing to the discomfort, he allowed himself to sit with it, just as he had been taught in the teachings of the Buddha. Silence, he began to realize, was not an enemy to be feared but a space to explore the depths of his inner world. It was in this stillness that he began to see his own mind more clearly, its patterns, its tendencies, and its impulses. In Buddhism, there is a concept known as vipassana, which means insight or clear seeing. It is through the practice of vipassana that we come to understand the true nature of our minds. Recognizing the impermanence, suffering, and emptiness of all things, the monk, by immersing himself in solitude, was slowly coming to this understanding. The more he meditated, the more he learned to observe his thoughts without attachment or aversion. He noticed how his emotions would arise, fear, anger, doubt, only to dissipate as quickly as they had appeared. This realization, that emotions are temporary and ever-changing, began to loosen the grip they had on his heart. But it was not just through meditation that the monk transformed. Solitude provided him the space to reflect on his life, his choices, and his deepest fears. Without the constant distractions of society, he could finally confront the parts of himself he had avoided. He thought about the way he had spent his younger years seeking validation and approval, constantly running after things that he thought would make him happy. He realized that these external pursuits had only ever been temporary fixes. They had never truly satisfied the longing in his heart. In the quiet of his solitude, the monk also found compassion, first for himself, and later for others. As he sat in silence, he began to realize that he was not alone in his suffering. All beings, he understood, experience pain and sorrow, This deepening compassion opened his heart in ways that he had never before experienced. The fear and loneliness that had initially been overwhelming began to transform into a sense of connection with the world around him. He saw that solitude did not mean separation, rather, it allowed him to connect more deeply with the true essence of life and others. One of the fundamental teachings of Buddhism is the understanding of the three marks of existence: impermanence, anicca; suffering, dukkha; and non-self, anatta. These teachings help us understand that all things are temporary, that suffering is an inherent part of life, and that the concept of a permanent, unchanging self is an illusion. Through his year of solitude, the monk came to see these truths more clearly. Speaking about the sign of impermanence, anicca shows us that during his time in solitude, the monk saw how everything in his mind and body was in a constant state of flux. Thoughts would arise and disappear, emotions would come and go, and even the seasons changed around him. He realized that nothing stays the same, that everything is impermanent. This understanding allowed him to release his attachments to the fleeting moments of happiness and pleasure, as well as to the moments of sadness and suffering. He no longer clung to the belief that his experiences defined him, but rather understood that they were simply passing events in the grand flow of life. The sign of suffering, dukkha, also shows us that the monk also began to see the nature of suffering more clearly. He had initially come to solitude seeking relief from external distractions, but he soon understood that true suffering arises from within. Our attachments, desires, and aversions are what bind us to suffering. Through his practice of mindfulness and meditation, the monk learned to observe his suffering without becoming overwhelmed by it. He realized that suffering is a natural part of life and that by acknowledging it, understanding it, and letting it go, we can find peace. And finally, the sign of non-self, anatta. Perhaps the most profound insight the monk gained during his solitude was the realization of non-self, anatta. He began to see that the self, this identity that we so often cling to, is not a fixed, unchanging entity. Instead, the self is an ever-evolving process, a collection of thoughts, memories, and experiences that are constantly shifting. The monk's year of solitude helped him let go of his rigid sense of self and allowed him to see his true nature, a being interconnected with all life, yet free from the ego-driven need for validation or recognition. And the story gradually approached the end of the year. The monk was no longer the same person who had entered solitude. He had transformed. He was more compassionate, more centered, and more peaceful. He had learned to sit with discomfort and silence without fear. His emotional struggles had given way to a deep sense of acceptance, and his restlessness had transformed into a sense of stillness and calm. The monk had discovered that solitude, when embraced with patience and mindfulness, was a fertile ground for growth and transformation. The monk's time in solitude had also allowed him to reconnect with the deeper aspects of his spiritual practice. He began to approach meditation not as a task or duty but as a sacred act of self-discovery. He understood that the purpose of meditation was not to escape the world but to engage more fully with it, to see life clearly without the distortions of the mind. His practice deepened, and he began to see the interconnection between all beings, understanding that his own suffering was a part of the greater collective suffering of the world. In the monk's story, it teaches us that loneliness is not something to fear or avoid, but something to be embraced. It is in solitude that we are given the opportunity to confront ourselves, our fears, our desires, and our attachments. Solitude allows us to sit with our emotions, to witness the workings of our minds, and to cultivate a deeper understanding of the true nature of our experience. In Buddhism, we are taught that the greatest wisdom comes not from external sources, but from within, the wisdom to understand our minds, to see the impermanence of our thoughts and emotions, and to accept the ebb and flow of life comes through the practice of mindfulness and meditation. The monk's year of solitude was a year of deep self-reflection, of facing his own fears and struggles, and of allowing the silence to guide him to a deeper sense of peace. From the monk's year of solitude, we can draw several important lessons. Solitude is not a punishment or something to be feared. It is an opportunity to reconnect with ourselves, to observe our thoughts and emotions without distraction. In silence, we can hear the truth of our inner world. The monk's journey shows us that true growth comes not from avoiding discomfort, but from embracing it. The challenges we face in solitude, loneliness, restlessness, physical discomfort, are opportunities to cultivate resilience and self-awareness. Through his solitude, the monk learned to accept himself and others with greater compassion. When we sit with our own suffering and fears, we come to understand that all beings experience the same struggles. This awareness leads to greater empathy and compassion for others. One of the greatest lessons from the monk's time alone was his realization of the impermanence of all things. By letting go of his attachments to both pleasant and unpleasant experiences, he was able to find peace. The monk's practice of mindfulness and meditation allowed him to see his mind clearly. Through mindful awareness, we can observe our thoughts without becoming attached to them, and this leads to greater clarity and peace. And we can see that the story, The 5 Years of Solitude of the Monk, illustrates the transformative power of being alone. When approached with mindfulness, patience, and self-compassion, solitude, though initially challenging, can lead to profound personal growth, spiritual awakening, and inner peace. The key is to embrace it not as a source of fear, but as a fertile ground for self-discovery. In solitude, we find the space to confront ourselves, to face our deepest fears, and to come to understand the true nature of our minds. And through this understanding, we can transcend suffering and cultivate lasting peace. As the monk's journey shows us, solitude is not just a retreat from the world, it is an opportunity to return to our true selves. When we embrace silence, we come to see that the answers we seek are not outside of us but within. In solitude, we find the wisdom, compassion, and peace that are the true fruits of spiritual practice. One of the main reasons people feel lonely in solitude is the absence of a goal. Without a clear purpose, time spent alone can feel aimless and unfulfilling. However, when we have clear spiritual or personal goals, our time alone becomes an opportunity to work towards something meaningful. The Buddha had a clear goal: to understand the nature of suffering and to find a way to overcome it. This goal guided him through years of solitude and meditation. Similarly, we can use our time alone to set personal goals, whether to cultivate patience, practice compassion, or deepen our spiritual understanding. When we set clear intentions for our time alone, we are less likely to be overwhelmed by negative thoughts and more likely to experience growth. Now, we've uncovered a vital truth: loneliness, when embraced with mindfulness, is not a curse, but a blessing in disguise. Just as the Buddha found peace and enlightenment in the solitude of the forest, we too can find the answers to life's deepest questions when we are willing to face our own inner world. The key, however, is setting the intention to approach solitude with openness and compassion. What is it that we are running from when we fear being alone? Perhaps, in our search for external connections, we've lost touch with the most important connection of all, the one we have with ourselves. As we've learned, the fear of loneliness is natural, but it's also temporary. When we transform it into a practice of mindfulness and reflection, we open the door to deeper self-awareness and emotional freedom. This is the path that leads us to lasting peace and spiritual growth. I'd love to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the fear of loneliness? Have you experienced the transformative power of solitude? Leave a comment below, and let's continue this important conversation. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Buddhism and Life for more insights on living a mindful, peaceful, and meaningful life. Remember, the path to true happiness begins within, and it starts by understanding and embracing our own company. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.